All righty, thank you for that. Okay, so we want to welcome back Reverend James Gaither. His title today, of course, is the power of your self concept. So, of course, Jim is no stranger to our community here, so we certainly always look forward to his inspiring messages, and we want to give him a hearty good welcome today. So, Jim, thanks for being here. A little bit about Jim is he was ordained a Unity minister in 1979, has an MA in philosophy and a doctorate in theology. He's taught Unity Ministerial and spiritual education for over 25 years and has been a minister in Unity churches for over 12 years. He's also got a couple of books out there, The Essential, Charles Fillmore, and The Hidden Realm of God, the historical Jesus and his healing philosophy. So, Jim, we are so glad that you are here today with us, and take it away. The floor is now yours. Thank you for being here today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. I appreciate it. I
Yeah.
love the song that Kyle picked out about being like water because it made me think of one of my favorite spiritual texts, the Tao Te Ching, where the that's part of the advice is in that book is to be like water. It's got little to do with my talk today, but I love the song and loved hearing it. So thank you for that, Kyle. So I'm going to begin actually with a saying from another one of my favorite texts. This is actually something that Jesus said. He said, "Whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours." Now, this is one of those puzzling statements that Jesus makes where we try to make some kind of sense out of it. And to some extent, that's what we'll be doing today. The challenge of it is how do you go about believing that you already have received something that you have not actually received yet. And a second point that arises is how does believing assure that you will receive? How is it causative? In what sense is it causative? So today I'm focusing on, I want to say, a way of understanding this saying and to applying it in our lives. I'm going to talk about the power of imagination and how that can help us establish those beliefs that assure that we will receive and how those beliefs affect our experiences. In order to dig into this topic, though, I need to look at the idea of self concept, which is the title of the talk, right? Your self concept, because the self concept turns out to be, in effect, the repository of our beliefs. And therefore, if we take this statement, if this saying to be true, it's if the self concept is the repository of our beliefs, then our self concept has a lot to do with what we experience in life and how we experience life. So, in psychology, it's theorized that we have a self concept consisting of three dimensions, if you will. There's the self image, there's the ideal self, and there's self esteem. Right? So let's look at these ideas and how they affect or how they really consist of our beliefs. First, starting with your self image. According to psychology, your self image is your perception of your real or actual self. Now, it's your perception of your actual self, right? And so this perception is kind of like a mirror. When you look in a mirror, you look at yourself, you actually see a kind of reverse image of yourself, actually, is what, in terms of what you look like. But more than that, as you look at yourself, you have thoughts about yourself, you have feelings about yourself, about that image in the mirror. Okay, so that's part of our self image is just how we look, literally how we look at ourselves and how we think about what it is that we're seeing sort of in the mirror. Your self image also includes what you believe that others see in you, what you believe that others see in you, what you believe others think about you could be completely wrong, but it's still part of your self-image, right? And the thing to keep in mind about this is that everyone sees you through their filters, right? So psychologists, I think, sort of assume or presume to see your actual self, your real self, but they see it through the filters of psychological theory, whatever psychological school they happen to belong to, and tests they may give you, and that sort of thing. But they're still looking at you through these filters. There's these theoretical filters. And likewise, everyone else who sees you or knows you, um, they they see you through their belief filters, their interpretation of your actions, their projections on you, their expectations of you, and even to some extent their understanding of psychological theory. Right. So people make sort of psychological judgments, even though they aren't necessarily psychologists and don't necessarily understand what they're talking about. They still sort of have these. It's all part of their filters of how they see you. Um, people also see you through their particular relationship with you. So your parents see you in one way. One of the interesting things about parents is that no matter how old their children get, they still tend to see them and respond to them as if they were still children. I always thought that was kind of funny as I got older, and my parents would still talk to me like I was living in their household, and you know, uh, talk to me as if I were still a child. Um, right. So your parents see you one way, your children see you another way. Your children see you as a parent. They have their image of you, that how they see you. If you work for someone, your supervisor sees you as an employee and looks at you through that filter. And if you are a supervisor of employees, then your employees see you as their boss or in some way as sort of in a supervisory capacity. That's the filter that they look at you through, or part of their filter. And of course, your friends see you as a friend, and that relationship, that kind of judgment. And your adversaries, if you have any, see you as an adversary. So all of these perceptions that you have, that others have about you, or at least your sense of what they see in you, is all part of what the psychologist calls the perception of your actual self. And the reason I go into this in some detail, or thinking about how people see us, is that all of these images of the actual self, or the real self, are actually distortions. They're kind of like funhouse mirrors. So again, even when you look at yourself in the mirror, what you see is actually a reversed image of what you actually look like. And as you do that, as you look at yourself, you may mentally exaggerate features that you don't like about yourself, or ones that you do like. So you may very well appear to yourself to be less attractive than you really are, or you may appear to yourself as more attractive than you really are. So I prefer to try to look at myself as more attractive than I really am. But in any case, we that's what we do. We interpret what we're seeing, right? And so this actual, what's called the actual real self, is a distortion. No matter how you or anyone else perceives it, it's kind of a distortion. It's incomplete. In other words, it's not your real self at all, but still, it's a part of your self concept, your self image. A second aspect is the ideal self. Okay, in simplest terms, your ideal self is what you want to be, what you want to be. And this idea, the ideal self, is partly conscious, but it's also partly unconscious, or in your subconscious. So when, for example, you feel embarrassed or guilty about something that you've done, in the past, or recent or distant past, and if you have these feelings, it's because you're unconsciously comparing your self-image, what you think you are, your actual self, to your ideal self. This distorted self-image then always appears to be less than the ideal self, because of all these filters and beliefs that we have. On the other hand, sometimes you are probably consciously aware of what you want to be, your ideal, your sort of highest aspiration of what you can become. And so this ideal self helps to motivate us. It helps to motivate us to grow and improve. So sometimes it produces negative feelings in comparing our ideal self to our current self image. But other times it's there pushing upon us subconsciously to grow and to improve, to become more like that ideal self. This ideal self is very important in spirituality and religion and psychology. The ideal self is expressed or represented in mythologies, um, and also is represented by people who appear to you to be heroic, people that you would like to emulate. The ideal self is sort of expressed in those as well. At the deepest level, your ideal self is an archetype. Okay, I'm referring now to sort of Jungian psychology. Jung regarded the Christ idea as an archetype of the self that's shared in Western culture. Jung wrote the Christ archetype is the idea of an overpowering, all-embracing, complete or perfect being. This archetypal idea is a reflection of the individual's wholeness, that is, of the self, which is present in him as an unconscious image. So we have this unconscious image of the ideal self that gets represented by various figures, but Jung is saying this is an archetype that's actually within us. And it corresponds to, I want to say, the mystic's idea of the divine, this overpowering, as Jung puts it, overpowering, all embracing, complete, perfect being. The really interesting thing about it to me, as Jung says, this is a reflection of yourself, of the self, this archetypal idea. It's a reflection of your wholeness, of all that you are, conscious and unconscious. Now, Jung didn't think that, for example, Jesus was the only representation of this ideal self. In fact, he said in the Eastern world, the equivalent of the ideal self is actually represented by the Buddha. That was his interpretation. Uh, the co-founder of Unity, Charles Fillmore, was aware of and mentioned this notion of this ideal self, which he called the perfect man idea. We can call it the perfect human idea. And he wrote that this perfect man idea, this perfect human idea, in God mind, is known under various names in many religious systems. The Krishna of the Hindu is the same as the Messiah of the Hebrews. So Krishna, the ideas of the Messiah that we find in Judaism, Buddha, Jesus, and others can all represent to different people in different religious traditions. They represent the ideal self. They're not the ideal self, but a representation of it that we kind of mirror, in which we see this ideal or this aspiration for the self. Okay, so this is also part of our belief system. Um, so every individual has an ideal true self. And that is why there are so many ideas of Jesus. There are probably as many ideas of Jesus and what he is and how he's interpreted. There's probably as many ideas as there are people, right? Or people who are aware of him. He represents the Christ or true self. And so we can see also this idea, whether it's Jesus or Messiah or Buddha or some other figure, we see it as a representation of what we are, a representation of our true self. And so when we read the Gospels, if you read the Gospels, what you're really seeing is the writers projecting their ideas of the Messiah onto Jesus, or the Greek word for Messiah is Christ. It's their projection, because for them, Jesus then is representing this true self, mostly unconsciously. All right. And so when we read the different gospels, we notice there's slightly different images of Jesus because they're different projections. And this has become this projection is multiplied, and that's why there's so many different not only different religions, but even with Christian religions, but even within Christian religions, people have different ideas about who Jesus was or how to emulate him, or who he was historically. So what we are really seeing when we read the Gospels, the story of Jesus, if Jung is right, what we're really seeing is simply a representation of what our true self is, our interpretation of it. In another way, everyone has a unique ideal self, which is why there's, again, so many different kinds of projections. But each unique ideal self, you have one, I have one, and so on, we all do, each one has, even though each one is unique and individual to us and our conditions, our circumstances, our ideal selves have common characteristics, right? So we recognize these qualities of the ideal self, right? Usually compassion, courage, wisdom, and so forth are ideals for what we should be, have qualities, and we share these qualities to a great extent, even though some people emphasize some characteristics more than others in their unfolding, right? So the context, the skills that we have or have developed, the knowledge that we've developed, the circumstances around us, for each one of us is different, which is why we have a sort of unique ideal self, nevertheless reflecting these qualities, right? So this is all part of our belief system. A lot of the ideal self is sort of buried. We're somewhat unconscious of it, but we're also to some degree conscious of it. Okay, so again, the second part of the self-concept is the ideal self, which is the closest thing to the reality of what we are. Okay, it's closer to that reality than what's called the self-image, or the actual self, if we want to call it that. So the third dimension is self-esteem. Self-esteem, in a way, is a kind of comparison of the self-image to the ideal self, because it's really about how you feel about yourself in the present moment. So this includes your sense of self-worth, right? Your self-esteem, your self-worth, your sense of what you can do, what your place in the world is. It's compared. It really emerges from comparing your self-image to your ideal self, okay, to what you perceive yourself to be. So, in a way, self-esteem is a kind of self-judgment. Now, it may be a positive self-judgment, it may be a negative self-judgment, but usually it's kind of a combination. So this is psychological theory, the three aspects of the self-concept, right? What is the self as it really is, as they say in philosophy, ontologically, as we might say? What is the metaphysical true self, right? The true being. Metaphysically, as we understand it, the true self is spirit, or in other words, pure consciousness. It's the consciousness, but not the content of the consciousness in any given moment. See, because the content changes, or the content changes, the consciousness remains the same. It is, in effect, it is in a sense unaffected by what it contains. So the reality of what you are, the reality of what we are, is this consciousness, this pure spirit, in the process of manifesting the idea of the ideal self. We are pure consciousness in a process of manifesting the ideal self. So, by this metaphysical notion, in a sense, there's only one true self. This one infinite universal spirit consciousness is what we are, and this consciousness is manifesting ideas of the ideal self in every place and every time. So in your life, what you are, the pure consciousness, is manifesting divine ideas, including the human embodiment of the ideal self. Okay. So as pure consciousness, we have a number of powers. We have the power of will or attention. We have the power of imagination. So this is where we come to that idea of imagination, your power of imagination, and how you can use your power of imagination to more fully actualize and manifest your ideal self. Power of imagination is power of consciousness to shape mind substance, the power to bring into visible form this invisible, perfect, ideal self. It's important to understand that this is a process. We don't immediately fully manifest our ideal self all at once. We manifest it partially, moment by moment, action by action, goal by goal. We use the power of imagination to help us more fully manifest this ideal self. One of the best books that has been written, I think, on the power of imagination is a book that was published in 1960. And maybe most of you have heard of it. I don't know. Maybe you must have read it. It's, again, since it's 1960, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but it's called Psychocybernetics by Dr. Maxwell Maltz. So maybe some of you have read this book, Psychocybernetics. This book began to change the professional and popular mindsets about the power of mind. Physicians and psychologists became more interested in testing the power of imagination. Maltz drew upon previous little noticed research and especially his own experience as a plastic surgeon. So he was a physician, he's a plastic surgeon. What Maltz found, excuse me, he found that many patients expected to feel better about themselves, to have higher self-esteem and have positive life changes as a result of plastic surgery, as a result of helping, the plastic surgery helping them look better, if you will. But instead, what people found was after surgery, they still had the same level of self-esteem. They still felt the same way about themselves as they did before the surgery. And for Maltz, this was not a healing, right? Because if the goal, part of the goal anyway, was to change how they felt about them, to raise their self-esteem, that wasn't happening. And so he investigated this idea of visualization. And he found that was a very good way to help people improve their self-image after their plastic surgery. He found that visualization exercises helped patients overcome the psychological blocks that they had and to improve their self-esteem to match their new sort of physical image of themselves. So he did additional research and he found examples of visualizing process that have been done long before he actually wrote the book. One of the most striking examples was how visualization had been used to improve athletic skills or game skills or sporting skills, right? So there have been studies that had already shown this, but nobody had paid much attention to them until Maltz talked about them in his book. So what happened is there was a kind of a revolution in sports because athletes then began to use visualization to improve their athletic skills, their athletic performance, and not only athletes, but also chess players. And then it spread to salespeople and so on. So since the 1970s, Olympic athletes, professional athletes, and others have used visualization to improve their performance. Why did they do that? Well, because it worked. Right? It worked to improve their performance. One person that you may have heard of was Tiger Woods, who used visualization to improve his performance. Another one, an earlier golfer, Jack Nicklaus. Jack Nicklaus said, I never hit a shot, not even in practice, without having a very sharp, in-focus picture of it in my head. So Nicklaus and others visualized performance. Muhammad Ali used visualization to maximize his boxing skills. He combined it with an affirmation that he used, and I'm pretty sure you've heard this. He just affirmed, I am the greatest, right? As an affirmation, but he used visualization to improve it. I can actually tell you about my own experience with this. One time I was in a bowling league and I wanted to improve my bowling average. And so I tried the visualization and I actually improved my bowling average by 15 points and using visualization, because that's all I did. I didn't like practice more. I just used these visualizations. And so I improved my average by 15 points. And that year I won the high score award. And so I know that it can work. Mostly though, I use visualization to motivate myself to do things. So if you have things that you want to do, but you have trouble getting motivated to do them, maybe it's a chore or some kind of action that you need to take. First, relaxing and visualizing doing it and having accomplished it actually helps, at least I found, helps to motivate to do it and to get it done. In his book, Maltz wrote that, this is a quote, experimental and clinical psychologists have proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that the human nervous system cannot tell the difference between actual experience an experience and an experience imagined vividly and in detail. Experimental and clinical psychologists have proved beyond a shadow of doubt that the human nervous system cannot tell the difference between an actual experience and experience imagined vividly and in detail. Basically, what this means is if you are visualizing doing something, it is like you are experiencing doing it. You are, in effect, believing before you have received. And so you gain actual experience from visualizing rather than going. And you can, of course, obviously, literally, physically practice things. So again, this has been used for many years in sales and psychology and in sports psychology. I actually knew a sports psychologist who worked with an Olympic athlete who won a decathlon, I think, and helped him improve his high jump skills, which was one of the areas where that particular athlete struggled. Anyway, to some extent, also visualization is being used for healing, especially in the area of cancer with the work of the Simons, to help the process along, to relieve symptoms and so on. I remember many years ago, I read an article, and it was so long ago that I haven't been able to recover the article. I didn't save it. I wish I had, but it was a newspaper article. In the article was basically about this woman who had a son who couldn't walk. He had some kind of, I don't remember what the particular ailment was, but he simply could not physically walk. So every day she refused to accept the diagnosis and the prognosis of the physicians. Every day she took her son to the park and she sat with him on the bench, on a park bench, and had him watch people walking. And she'd have him watch people walking, and then she'd have him quietly go within himself and visualize himself doing the same thing. And remarkably, amazingly, the boy learned to walk from this process of visualization. So there's something there that hasn't been fully explored in by psychology or by medical science, because they tend to want to just study things that they can observe and measure. And visualization is one of those kinds of things. It's difficult to observe and measure, so they don't necessarily want to deal with it. But more and more physicians are finding ways to explore this power. If you think about the world metaphysically, if you're an idealist, as I am, and believe that ultimately reality is mind, not matter, if you think about it that way, it would seem that in theory, anything could be healed with imagination, with the mind. I can mention all kinds of quotations from different philosophers and physicists who affirm that the nature of the universe is mind, but I'll just make one reference to a current physicist, Dr. Richard Kahn Henry, who is professor and director of the research department of physics and astronomy at Johns Hopkins University. He wrote a little article about this, how the universe is mind, and the sentence towards the end gets directly to the point of the whole thing. He said, the universe, quote, the universe is immaterial, mental and spiritual. So in theory, metaphysical theory, it should be possible to heal anything through the use of mind, and especially imagination. So a lot of other things could be said about imagination. However, I have a limited time frame. And so what I want to do now is to use the imagination. This is a common exercise. It's based on, the particular exercise we're going to be doing is based on an article that I found in Psychology Today, but the process is pretty much the same as you might read anywhere. And so begin this process, and this is our meditation. This is our experiment. I want you first in your own mind to choose a highly specific goal. Okay, so the goal could be to motivate yourself to get something done. It could be some financial goal, some career goal. It could be doing something in your house. It could be health or healing, right? So choose the objective that you want, because I'm going to give you a device here. We'll do it as an exercise, but then it's something that you can do every day and work with this idea about how to change your manifestation of your ideal self using your power of imagination. The article recommended doing this either before you go to sleep or just after you've awakened to do this exercise. So that's a recommendation, but you can work it into any part of your day as you choose. So I take it that everybody's got some kind of objective that you want to focus on. So you're going to choose one specific objective. Okay. Once you have that, I invite you to, first of all, begin to relax. So usually it's helpful to find a comfortable position, close your eyes, right? Turn your attention inward. A helpful way to turn your attention inward is to simply feel your breathing. Feel your breathing. Just let yourself relax into it. Let the universe breathe through you. Just feel it. Let it take on its own natural dimension. Sometimes it's helpful to think of your hands as being heavy and warm. Get that sensation in there as you relax. You know, as you are relaxing, begin to call to mind this goal that you've chosen. And begin to imagine that you've already achieved the goal. So, for example, if your goal is to improve your golf game, imagine yourself golfing and improve this higher level. Or if it's your goal is to clean up your basement or something, imagine it's already done. Your goal has to do with health. Imagine yourself as radiant with energy and light, feeling strong, feeling energetic. Create the picture. Let the picture be created in your mind, in your imagination, clearly and vividly as possible. As you create this imagery, fill in a setting, the setting in which you see this goal accomplished. What's the space around you like? What does it look like? How does it feel? Maybe there are specific aromas that you associate with this space. For example, if you're outside, the smell of fresh grass. You can bring in the peripheral sounds. Let your full imagination fill in this picture to touch many of your senses as you can. See the objective as being fulfilled. I'm going to be silent for a time to allow you to fully sink into this, seeing this goal as fulfilled, imagining it as fulfilled, believing that you have already received it, getting the full feeling of that. So now I'll be quiet for a time as you do that, as you let the image become more and more vivid in your mind. Now, as you're holding to this fulfilled image, this belief that you are to receive, I invite you to form an appropriate affirmation, such as I am healthy and strong, energetic and vital, my some affirmation related to the goal, the manifestation of that goal. I am what? As you get the affirmation clearly in mind, know that it is connected to this visualization, so that every time you think the affirmation, you bring the visualization and the feeling of it, the objective, into mind, feeling that. Every time they use the affirmation, you strengthen your self-confidence, self-esteem, bring into fuller realization your ideal self as it's related to this particular goal. I invite you to once again become aware of your surroundings, your breath. Release for a time the imagery, knowing that is now working within you to manifest the good that you seek. Give thanks for it. So we use that affirmation. We also often end prayer with Amen, which means it is truth. And so it is. Again, we bring ourselves fully back into this place to complete the service.
All right. Reverend James, thank you so much for that. We greatly appreciate it. I love the meditation part. You know, I'm not very good at it, but man, once if I can get it going, I'm usually pretty successful in accomplishing what I'm after. So thank you for sharing that with us and for your talk. I mean, it was fabulous, all of the different concepts and different versions of ourselves and how other people see us. So thank you so much. We appreciate you being here with us today and for the message and the meditation that you shared. So thank you.
I hope everyone has an opportunity every day to continue to manifest this, because if you do it for a while, you begin to see it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you.